it's Drybear, and today I wanted to give my review of Dune Awakening. I did play some of the beta tests for Dune Awakening. I've been playing since launch, and after, the better part of, 500-600 hours of the game, I wanted to give my review of the game overall, because I think there's a big mixture of feedback around the game as well. There are parts of the game that are excellent, really, really good, very well made, and super fun, and you'll get a good value out of it. And there are definitely parts of the game that are definitely not well made and need some love and some updates. So today, I want to walk through my overall view of Dune after, 500 hours or so after launch, and just kind of talk about where the game is at, where I'd like to see the game go in the future, and what you might want to know if you're someone who's never played the game before or is just getting into the game for the first time. Now, the short end of it here is, this is where I would put the game right now. The game itself is a very solid survival game. I would say that if you like survival games, you like the idea of collecting resources, progressing through tiers, building things, collecting things and putting them in your base, and having things to explore, I think Dune Awakening is actually an excellent game. And if you were to get Dune Awakening today, you would get a solid maybe 50 to 200 hours of gameplay out of it that you would thoroughly enjoy if you have any proclivity towards survival games at all. So, as far as like hours per dollar spent, it is very high value right now. So realistically, most $60 USD games nowadays are between 20 to 40 hours of like solid gameplay. Some are less, some are more, depending on what kind of game you're getting. So getting 50 to 200 hours of gameplay that's really good out of Dune Awakening, I think is awesome, especially if you like the Dune IP, you like the universe that it's in. I think it's very, it pays homage to the universe very well, and represents what you might see in the movies very well. So overall, I think the core of the game is very strong. However, I would also say that you kind of have to temper your expectations for the end game. I think once you finish, there are 6 tiers of progression right now. As any survival game has progression of tiers. You start at the very bottom, you work your way up from the lowest level of tier all the way up to the highest level, getting better equipment, better technology, better buildings, better items, all of that as you go through. The first 5 tiers before you get to Endgame are very good. However, once you reach tier 6 and you get to the Endgame, I think Funcom is in a very awkward position right now on what they want the game to be, how they want the Endgame to look, and what they want the future of this game to be as a live service, right? If you don't treat it as a live service game, you just treat it as a survival game that you pick up and play, I think that you'll have a great time. You'll get anywhere from 50 to 200 hours. You'll get a good 100 hours of gameplay out of this, and you'll probably enjoy every minute of it as you unlock all of the classes, you do all the quests, you finish all the contracts, and you do the combat and finish the main story quest. You'll have a great time with it. Now, as it stands right now, the end game of Dune Awakening is a very rough outline. They have this idea of this open area. So this is what you're looking at here is called the Deep Desert. And what they had hoped for the end game was that this would be an open wasteland full of resources to pillage. The final tier of progression would be about exploring this area. And they had this idea that it would be open PvP, that the whole thing would just be kind of like it is in the universe of Dune, very competitive, political heads fighting over resources and land, cutting each other off, backstabbing each other, and trying to come out ahead. And that was kind of what they wanted to have. However, it doesn't feel like, at least from my perspective, that they put a lot of effort into the end game. The end game feels very barren, pun intended. It's mostly a large open desert with very little interest in it. You can see even on screen, like most of the time, this is what your end game loop is going to be. Flying around the deep desert, waiting for something to happen or looking for something to pop up. And that's it. Like, it's just a lot of waiting and open-ended space. There is PvP in the end game, and there's definitely a big debate going on right now around whether PvP is better or PvE is better. Should there be PvP servers? Should there be PvE servers? And also, is the game even an MMO at its core? See, their vision for the end game was really just about a recycling process, because realistically, what they didn't want to have happen, and I can totally relate to this, was people would pick up Dune Awakening, get through that 50 to 200 hours solid gameplay, and then put the game down and not play again, right? They don't want that. They want people to have something that's renewable, something that's fresh every single week, and something that they can kind of log into and keep track of. However, I don't think that they really hit that mark as of right now. And if you're jumping into Dune Awakening expecting to have a solid live game service update game that has regular updates that are really interesting and exciting, I don't think Dune Awakening is in that position right now. And I think you probably should go into the game expecting that you're going to get, again, a very solid core core experience that gives you a solid 100 plus hours of gameplay, and then you're gonna have to wait to see what Funcom does going into the future. So with that kind of overview out of the way, let's go through like the game, the areas of the game, and kind of give my feedback on, you know, what's good, what's bad about it, and what's in between for that as well, and also kind of what my expectations are for the future of this game going forward and what I think they can do with it as well. Now, when it comes to a survival game, I would say that they got most of the mechanics right. They also didn't commit what I would consider the cardinal sins of making survival games. There's like 3 or 4 things that I would consider cardinal sins of making a survival game that some companies make the mistake of doing when they make a survival game. One of them is not being able to craft from storage. I think there's a lot of like very important core things about survival games that just you never want to make that mistake. So you can craft from storage in this game. I think they do a pretty good job of balancing the forcing functions of the game. So because you're in a desert, you have to worry about dehydration. In the bottom left corner, you can see that I have this water drop. So like making sure you're staying hydrated is very important. Dehydration can kill your character, and so you're constantly worrying about gathering, you know, water, you know, collecting water, holding onto water. Water is a very valuable resource. And they also have some pretty cool things like the cut array, being able to draw lines on that as well. That's a pretty cool mechanic for collecting materials. The vehicles in general work quite well, and the building system is pretty strong as well overall. So I think in general, I think they did a great job with making the core of a survival game that would be up there with a lot of the other survival games that are of its ilk. Now, I wouldn't put it in the same category as a lot of like the single player survival games like The Forest or Subnautica or Green Hell. I think a lot of those are more of like a canned survival game experience with a lot more mechanics to look at than just, you know, basics. But in general, I think they did a really good job of making kind of this multiplayer co-op style survival game. When they started out making and announcing Dune Awakening, they had actually marketed it as a MMO, which I would not consider it a massively multiplayer online game, mainly because a lot of what you're going to experience is heavily segmented and instant. So let me tell you what that actually means. There is a core zone called Hagga Basin, which you're seeing on screen right now, that is your kind of introduction to the game. You're going to spend most of your first 100 or 200 hours in Hagga Basin, working through the environment, working your way up through quests, exploring the area, and moving up through the tiers of progression. And this zone is pretty much all PvE except for a few contested areas in the shipwrecks. And this is where I think the game shines. The game in Hagga Basin is stellar. And I think actually there would be no controversy for Dune Awakening if it only had Hagga Basin as its core gameplay without any attempts at Endgame right now, because the game, like the core gameplay of Hagga Basin is very good. Then you're able to, once you finally create an ornithopter, which is the flying vehicle of the game, the one you would see in the movies, then you move your way outside of Hagga Basin to the other zones that are outside of it. Next, moving on to the combat. And I know there actually has been a lot of opinions on the combat in Dune Awakening. And as someone who has been playing games since I was like 3 years old, I play every game I possibly can. Before I die, I want to try and play every game ever made. I try to play as many games as possible, and I can tell you, at least from my perspective, that the combat in Dune Awakening is nothing more than adequate. It is not stellar. It doesn't blow my mind. It's not like the best combat ever. You know, I personally think if you think that Dune Awakening combat is the best combat can be, then you need to play more games in general, because realistically, it has a long way to go. However, that's not really a major detractor, right? It's not like you're playing Dune Awakening for the best action combat you've ever experienced. I think it serves the game well. It is good enough, like it's adequate for a game of this style, and has some kind of cool expression. I would say that the ground combat is significantly better than any semblance of vehicle combat they have right now, but it's useful. You have melee, you have ranged. The melee have the ability to stagger enemies and knock them down and use abilities through that way. There are a class system. You can combine the classes together to create your own abilities and passives that create your own play style, and there's just ways you can play PvE combat, PvP combat, and I think in general it's good enough. And there's also armor styles, armor weight classes, and ways to combine that together. It's not excellent, but it's not bad either. It's good enough for the genre that you have. So I wouldn't expect you to go into Dune Awakening thinking that you're going to have, you know, like Neo or Devil May Cry or some kind of crazy combat, and you're parrying and dodging and jumping and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, because realistically there is a limit of what you can do in the combat, but it's satisfying, it's enjoyable, and there's a lot of different ways for skill expression and you having your own personality applied to the combat and how you're playing. Now, part of the problem right now, at least in the current state of the game, is that most of the combat that happens in PvP is actually vehicle combat, for the main reason that the deep desert, which is your primary PvP zone, is very large, right? And it's most of the zone is covered by sand and will have sandworms in between, right? So you're not going to be walking around on foot. And I think that's kind of one of the big travesties for Dune Awakening right now, is that you don't really get to use the ground combat all that much in PvP. It's mostly used in PvE when you're doing dungeons like testing stations or shipwrecks, because primarily it's what you're going to run into. You're actually really just doing ground combat for PvE and vehicle combat for PvP. And I would say that the vehicle combat in Dune Awakening is like entry level. It's actually quite horrible. It's very basic. The only thing you get for vehicle combat is that you will be able to craft rocket launchers for your vehicles like your ornithopter and then shoot dumb rockets. What I mean by dumb rockets is they're not guided. There's no lock-on system. They don't even have like basic flying vehicle combat with like chaff or noise, or even be able to shoot out decoys to like break lock-on. There's no warning. There's no HUD system. There's no semblance of dogfighting in the game at all. It literally is you fire dumb rockets that just shoot forward when you launch them, and if they hit the target, they'll do damage. But because of the way the game is set up, at least in a networked environment, it's kind of janky and a little laggy. It gets desynced sometimes. You don't really know if it's going to hit the target. If it does hit the target, you don't know what part of the vehicle it's going to hit, and so there's always this back and forth of trying to be able to deal damage to the target. But I feel like there needs to be something for ground combat in the future, especially if they want to continue on this path of PvP, where they could very easily end up creating some really awesome ground-based PvP or PvE combat that just gets kind of drowned out by the fact that everyone's really just in an ornithopter shooting rockets. So what I'd love to see them explore is more areas or encounters in the game that would encourage or require ground combat, because I think that is where the game shines. I think that if they wanted to have viable, reliable, enjoyable vehicle combat, I think they actually have a much further way to go before that actually becomes a reality. I've had people in my comments say that, the dogfighting in Dune Awakening is amazing, ornithopter versus ornithopter is amazing, and honestly, I can't see how anyone who has played any dogfighting game or any like vehicle or ship-based combat game can come to Dune Awakening ornithopter combat and think that it's the bee's knees. I think it is so below average, very basic entry-level vehicle combat. There's nothing really impressive about it at all, and they have a long way to go before they can make vehicle combat something very exciting. But I think what you're sold on and what you experience through the Hagga Basin, again, that core gameplay that they've developed that's very good, those first 50 to 200 hours the experience in Hagga Basin is good, right? Finding the right weapon style, you have your pistols, your light rifles, your heavy rifles, sniper rifles, you have your heavy weapons like machine guns, flamethrowers, you have different abilities for movement, being able to stun targets, poison them, right? They have all of this like wealth of opportunity for ground-based combat, person-to-person combat that they, when you get to Endgame, you get little to no exposure to it at all, because almost all of the combat is based around large areas with unsafe, sand areas that you have to cover with a vehicle. So almost all of the Endgame combat is ornithopter to ornithopter, and your only option for that is using rocket launcher pods. If you ever get out of your ornithopter, you will get blown up by a rocket in a single shot. There's nothing you can really do. And so you get like this really cool, great core Hagga Basin experience that gets immediately soured by ornithopter only in the Endgame deep desert. Now, I think they also have some things that they could tweak up with the abilities as well. There are some abilities that are just generally better than any other ability in the game. One of the best examples is the Shiga Wire Claw from the Soldier class, which is a grappling hook. I would say that, that plus the dash from the Bene Gesserit, there's a couple abilities in the game that just don't have the same, they're not in the same league as the other abilities. So I think that they need some ability balance balance, and may even need to make it so that some abilities end up being baseline and they don't take up your ability slots. But I think that they really should just lean into what they have that's successful. Focus on adding more abilities, focus on balancing the abilities that are there, and focus on creating situations where you're actually using the ground combat to play more of a survival game than what they have right now. They also have a really cool environment too. I mean, you get some really cool like desert map vibes. I think that, you know, if you were to like, the idea of going into Dune Awakening was quite risky, right? The idea that they're going to have a mostly monotone brown desert that you're going to be spending a lot of your time in, that could have very easily been very boring and lame to look at. But I think with the sandstorms that roll through, the Coriolis in the skybox that they have, and all the different ships flying through, the game is actually quite gorgeous and some really cool effects come out of it. So I think there could have been a lot more that would have gone wrong with Dune Awakening that just didn't, because they did it so well, right? That kind of, you know, the exploration aspect in the desert. And they've even hinted at, in some of their earlier interviews, which they haven't done recently, but they hinted at they might want to do more than just Arrakis, which is the planet that you're on right now. Obviously, the Dune universe was actually the inspiration for Star Wars universe in general, but it is a, you know, galactic universe. There are other planets, there are other homeworlds, there are other biomes and things you can go to, and they could actually create a world where you go from planet to planet, experiencing different biomes, meeting the different factions and the different political heads and things like that, exploring their areas, and just seeing what the universe has to offer. The next thing to talk about is the overworld map, which you see right here. This map is actually super cool, but very underutilized. I think they could make this a lot more interesting as a map in general. So this is the way that you travel between major zones, is you go into this overworld map and then travel as this little icon. So I think that this whole area is actually, like, some people say just remove it because it doesn't fit. And I actually think they shouldn't. I think this is a very unique looking screen that is super fun. It's just very underutilized right now. Because right now, as you can see, I'm like moving around the world map. There are mechanics on it. You can see I run out of fuel and run out of water. For whatever reason, the water and fuel that you have on your ship when you're on this map are not your actual fuel or water, right? It's not the water meter you have on your character, and it's not the fuel you have in your vehicle. It's a separate resource. And you recharge these by going to these deposits, standing on them for a few seconds, and then your meter will fill up and you'll be back to full as well. But I think what they could do is they could add new planets, new zones, new biomes, new areas, and you get to them by using this cool overworld map. It almost feels like an old arcade game like Galaga or something. And I think they could add mechanics to it. They could add like boosts and jumps and, you know, racing and like really cool stuff that could make this feel really fun. You can see right now, there are other players going place to place. Like, it actually is, it shows other players moving around. However, right now, the only thing you use this map for is going from place to place. So you go, Harko Village is one of the main hubs, and then you just slowly move in a straight line across this giant square. And then once you get to the location, you land, and that's it. Like, there's not a lot going on. They did promise that there would be mechanics on this in general. So like, they said that there would be random dungeons that would appear on the overworld map that you could land on, and they would have unique loot. As far as I know, those aren't implemented. I've not seen a single one show up the entire time. I haven't seen anyone talk about it the entire time. So like, most of that has been kind of a miss for me in general, but I think it could be cool, like unique locations. Some of the main story quests does have it. So like, I'm out of fuel here. You said go over here. I stand on top of this, and then my fuel bar is going to go up and refill. But like, some of the locations that you experience from the main story quests are from this overworld map. And I think this could actually be a really cool, fun addition to the game that breaks up the monotony of just running around in the desert, is now you get to kind of play around with this. You can only enter this map once you have an ornithopter built and you're flying around, but I think it's cool, and I think they should put a lot more effort into making it stronger. Now, when it comes to the immersion aspect, it's actually pretty good. So this is my Hagga Basin right now. All the Hagga Basins are limited to 40 people, unfortunately, but each person can have like 3 different bases, and you actually get a kind of wide list of people using different building sets and kind of creating their own bases, and you actually end up getting a pretty interesting layout here. You do have situations like this one right here where people just got bored of the game and quit. So this is someone that built a full Harkonnen base, but then they just quit and stopped playing. So now their base became unpowered, their ornithopters decayed and got destroyed by the sand, and I'm guessing this player is no longer playing anymore. And in general, I really like the building system. I mean, there's some games that have better building systems, but I think this is one of the better versions of it. It allows for a lot of creativity with, you know, creating areas for your vehicles, crafting stations, different shapes and shape languages. And I think as they add, this is the Harkonnen amount of light that you have here. But I think as they add more building sets and more, you know, construction sets and things that you can do, you actually end up creating a really fun atmosphere for a building slash survival game that really shines in the Dune universe. Now let's talk about the question of the hour, because I think this is probably the most talked about topic for Dune Awakening and where it sits right now, and that is the idea of PvP, PvE, and everything in between. Because I think that right now, at least the vision that they had for the game from Funcom is that they would be able to perfectly blend PvE and PvP in their game to the point where everyone's happy, PvEers are happy, PvEers and PvPers are happy, and everyone's super excited. But I think what's happening right now is they have created a game that has alienated both PvEers and PvPers, where most of the PvP in the game is very segmented to certain areas or is very relegated to ship combat. So this is me, I was, you know, in the deep desert with my assault trying to get spice. Someone waited around the corner until I got out of my ornithopter, shot me with a couple rockets, and then just started blowing me up, disabled my locomotive module, and then destroyed my ship from that standpoint, which you know, that's kind of where a lot of the PvP is right now. Now, the tried and true solution that most games have been able to do over many decades of gaming is that they find ways for PvPers to be in their element and fully enjoy the PvP experience, and also PvEers to be in their element and fully enjoy the PvE experience. But I think what they've done right now in the deep desert they've created for Endgame, I think is not a very good form of PvP, right? Because you can't loot things from other players. Most of the PvP is anonymous, which means you don't know until someone kills you what their name is. And then even if you know what their name is after they kill you, you can't find them again. It's not like you can create rivalries. Like all of the experiences I've had that have been super fun in open world PvP of this style, you know, Daok back in the day, RVR, doing PvP in like EverQuest 1, classic WoW or original WoW, or even just like PvE slash PvP survival games, a lot of it you can create rivalries, right? Some person comes and they hurt you and they take something away and you get pissed and you set up some ambush to take them down, and then they call their friends in, you call your friends in, you have this big war, and it's super fun. You're trying to best people. However, a lot of the systems that I think are implemented in Dune Awakening Endgame right now don't allow for any of that at all, right? Like the fact that everyone's anonymous, you can't see name tags, you don't know who the person is, they can hide away from you. All of this is exacerbated by their kind of shoddy server meshing system. So right now I play with maximum draw distance on. However, maximum draw distance right now is like from me to that dune halfway across the screen. It's like a couple hundred meters at most, which means that anyone past that, even at maximum draw distance, won't be there. You can't see people from very far away, which means as you're cruising around looking for PvP or trying to do PvP, people will pop in and out of existence even at short distances, which means that you get ambushed even when you were being prepared. When you're looking around, listening and paying attention, because of the way their, you know, networking architecture is set up, even if you're doing everything right, people can still get the jump on you because they didn't load in on time, which is super bizarre and very weird for an open world, open area PvP of that kind. Add to that the anonymous aspect to it, the fact that you can't see who it is, you don't know who they are. I think it adds to the immersion of the experience, the fact that people can hide, right? Without UI elements, it's easier to hide in plain sight because you can just stand still, you can hide behind a corner, you tuck your vehicle away. The UI elements will usually give you away in PvP situations, but I think it also takes away the rivalry aspect of PvP so that you can't develop rivalries with other players. Like you don't know who it is, you don't know where they come from, you don't know what faction they belong to, you don't know what guild they are, you don't know anything about them, you can't develop any kind of interaction between that player because everything's anonymous until it's all said and done, and that's assuming even the name telling even works. Half the time when I kill someone, they don't see my name. When someone kills me, I don't see their name. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It doesn't work all that well. So it just kind of takes away the, you know, the gritty, you know, harsh player versus player experience by not having the core elements that are there as well. Add to the fact that you have all the jankiness and the teleporting and the loading in and out and disappearing and all of that, and then you add to the fact that now they're trying to move the PvE areas into the PvP areas, right? Because they forced the PvEers and the PvPers to cohabitate, the PvEers are upset because they're getting ganked by PvP players, and the PvPers are upset because they can't get the value that they want out of what's going on. So the whole thing is just kind of a mess. And now, because the PvEers have been upset for the last couple of weeks, they actually took the PvE safe zones and moved those further into the deep desert so that PvEers have access to the tier 6 materials that they can do. I mean, sometimes you get situations like this. Like I'm flagged in PvP right now. Me and this other guy have no intention to fight each other. We're not equipped with rockets right now, and we're just kind of just peacefully like living in this this relationship where I don't shoot him, he doesn't shoot me. We're just trying to get spice and that sort of thing. I don't have rockets on my ornithopter right now, so everything's chill and we're just vibing. But because they moved the PvE zone further up into the PvP area, you get more PvE griefing, but you also get these really weird situations where PvPers are upset because now PvEers are encroaching on their space. PvEers are upset because now there's PvPers that are kind of trying to, body block them and do ridiculous things. There's even situations where even in the PvE zones, if you're flying a big ornithopter like a carrier around, other players might come behind you and body block you or grief you by blocking the entrance to your base or preventing you from exiting a dungeon. Like it's almost like creating the worst case scenario for PvE and the worst case scenario for PvP so that everyone's unhappy. It's not even a happy compromise. Everyone's just upset because they're not getting what they want out of the whole system. So I think the simplest solution for this is to do what pretty much every other multiplayer PvE/PvP game does on the market in the gaming industry now. Create a space for PvPers to enjoy PvP and create a space for PvEers to enjoy PvE instead of trying to force them to cohabitate and force them both to suffer and have a lesser version of what they want. For example, what a lot of MMOs or MMO lights do is they have a PvP server where everything is PvP and they have a PvE server where everything is PvE. Now, generally, as an ex-developer, I can tell you there is always a risk in fragmenting your audience, right? This happens all the time in MMOs where, certain areas get too fragmented, queues get too split up, there's not enough players, especially as the game gets older and older and the player base naturally wanes as people get bored. You get a situation where if you have PvP servers and PvE servers, maybe the PvP servers get underpopulated or the PvE servers get underpopulated, and you lose that kind of, other player experience that you have. And this was also on their survey that they put out recently as well. So all of that is part of the experience. However, I think PvPers, myself included, would be super excited to do a PvP server. If they did a PvP server where Hagga Basin was pure PvP and Deep Desert, like only the faction hubs are safe, everything else is pure PvP, I would love that. I think that would be super fun. Like you're always on edge. Even in Hagga Basin, like you're trying to hide from people, you can gank people, you're always like fighting for your life. I think that would be super fun. You'd have to do something where the bases, like your main headquarters base in Hagga Basin, would be protected in some way. That way you're not like, when you log off, you're worried about your base being raided. But I think games like Rust do this really well. Even games that they've created, like Conan, for example, right? All of the games that they've worked on have systems like this. And I think that could be really cool if they wanted to go down that road. And they could also make pure PvE servers where everyone just focuses on base building, creative mode, collecting resources, moving through the tiers and finding their own PvE experience throughout that could be really fun and interesting for them. I think that they're really trying to do too much with this, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm all for developers trying to shoot for the stars and just get as high as they can. I think ideally, if they could create an environment where PvEers and PvPers could cohabitate and have a great time, that's great in theory, but I don't think they're anywhere near that kind of utopia with the system they develop. I think a lot of the systems they have are very rote and basic, and in some cases undercooked. And so you have it's kind of like poorly implemented systems that don't allow for that kind of ecosystem to exist in a healthy way. And if you're not going to be able to do that, you might just want to cave and create different areas for that. Now, if they don't want to do PvE servers and PvP servers, they could just do zones because they kind of already have that already. Hagga Basin, 98% of Hagga Basin is PvE only. They could create a zone that is PvP only, but it needs to not be a zone that is where the PvEers go to get the best resources in the game, right? If tier 6 only exists in Deep Desert, that's not the same as creating creating a battleground or a PvP area. You're creating a PvE area that the PvEers have to go to get resources to continue their game loop and, you know, keep moving on, but you're forcing that area to be PvP at the same time with poorly made, undercooked mechanics that just don't align with that goal in general. So they could just make deep desert PvE and then make an actual PvP zone that is all PvP. I would love it, by the way, if they could create like an urban ground-based combat PvP zone that's as large as Hagga Basin, for example, that is all PvP. Like everything's flagged PvP. When you go into this new zone, it's all fighting and it's mostly ground combat using your abilities, using your class, using your weapons, using your armor, the setup you can load up that you bring with you. That would be super fun, and it would create a really fun environment for utilizing the core aspect of the game, the ground combat, the character combat, the skill and class combat that works so well for them. I just feel like where they've built the game and what they've built up to for right now, they've taken this really solid core that's a really good survival game that gets you 100 to 200 hours of good gameplay that is immediately soured by this awful endgame poorly implemented system that just makes everyone upset and unhappy in ways that they don't really seem to fully grasp as to why. Like moving the PvE zone up in the deep desert doesn't make things better for everyone else, and I think they really need to kind of think about what they want the game to be, and maybe think about segregating the PvPers and the PvEers in a way where both of them can be happy so that they can cohabitate by playing the same game, not necessarily in the same area, but still playing the same game. MMOs have been doing this for a very long time. You know, I'm someone who plays a lot of MMOs. I've played most of the MMOs ever made. You can go and do your PvP, you can go do your PvE, you can still talk to your friends, and you can invite your friends to do arenas or battlegrounds or whatever. All of that works great, and then you can kind of just choose what activity you're going to do, and that activity is optimized to be the best experience for the people that like that kind of activity. You're not forcing people to do things. It's like sending a vegan to a steak restaurant and sending someone who only eats red meat out to a field to eat grass, right? Like neither of them are going to be happy. They're not getting what they want, and you're just kind of like removing the fun from the game in general. But I digress. That's kind of my thoughts on Dune Awakening right now. There was more of just like a brain dump than it was like a formal review. But let me know what you think about the current state of Dune Awakening and where it's at right now, the controversy, or I guess the debate, let's call it, over PvP versus PvE, and what your experience has been. I think in general, the core game is very good. They just have a lot of work to do on what they want to do next, which they could solve. They could release a really strong expansion for this game that builds upon the first 5 tiers of the game, creates opportunities for fun PvP, creates opportunities for PvEers to keep grinding the core gameplay loop, and, I think it has a bright future. The ball is just in Funcom's court to see if they can nail it, figure out what people like about their game, build upon the stronger aspects of the game, and maybe, be a little bit more flexible in the areas that just really aren't working for them in general. But let me know what you think down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.